3 messages before today's interview educates and motivates you. First, if you're a domain name investor, don't you have unique legal needs that require domain name technical know-how and industry experience? That's why you need David Westlow of Wiley Rein. Go search for David Westlow on Domain Sherpa, watch his interview, and you can see for yourself that he can clearly explain issues, can help you with buy-sell agreements, deal with website content issues and UDRP actions, and even help you write your website terms and conditions. David Westlow is the lawyer to call for internet legal issues. See for yourself at newmediaip.com. Second, managing multiple domain name marketplace and auction site accounts is a pain. Inevitably, you forget to sign into one and you lose a great domain, or worse. Now imagine using a single, simple to use and comprehensive control panel to manage all of your accounts. That's Protrata. You can set up search filters, analyze domains, automate bidding, list domain names for sale, buy domains across all major marketplaces. Protrata also has a new semantic engine that builds Google-friendly websites with rich content and network feeds. Sign up at Protrata.com to get 20 free credits and start building and monetizing your domains today. Finally, if you have questions about domain names, where should you go to ask them? The answer is dnforum.com. Not only is DN Forum the largest domain name forum in the world, it's the best. You can learn about domain names and the industry, buy and sell domain names, talk about the domain name news that's happening in the industry, and even meet domainers just like yourself. Register for a free DN Forum account and begin advancing your skills and knowledge today. And when you do sign up, send me a friend request so we can connect on DN Forum. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name entrepreneur and investor directly from the experts. We've all had a great idea for a business, and the most effective way to become successful with any business is to build a memorable brand that's easily recognizable and embraced by your customers. This creates a competitive edge, so naturally you need a domain name that accurately reflects your business and your branding strategy. But what if that perfect domain name is only available for a king's ransom and you can't afford it outright? You know you need it. How do you make it yours? Well, if you were buying a car or a house or a physical building on a piece of property in your downtown town or city for your business, you'd know what to do. You'd go to a bank or a financial institution to get financed. But what about your company's brand online? Today we're joined by Adam Paddock, founder of Zenscrow.com, who has a solution to help financially match up premium domains and the people who want to build their businesses on them. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Adam, in your words, can you describe what Zenscrow.com is? And let me start off by spelling it for the audience. It's spelled Z-E-N like Zen, and then S-C-R-O-W.com. So what is Zenscrow in your own words?
Basically, it's a platform that secures and makes transactions that are basically seller financed easy and 100% secure. So these are sales that are done over X amount of monthly payments or leases. They can be leases with a balloon payment at the end, so a lease with an option to buy. Basically, if it's a transaction that involves some sort of payments over a monthly period while the buyer actively uses the domain, so they actually build upon that domain and use it for their business, Zenscrow is there to not only secure it, but to make the process easy for both buyer and seller.
Okay, so that makes sense. So it's a seller-financed opportunity to easily create an agreement between a buyer and a seller where it's a rent-to-own or a lease-to-own option, and the buyer gets access to it for that period of time.
That's correct. That's one of the questions that we get a lot is that second point about access. So the buyer gets full access to it by pointing the DNS to their settings. They can use it to build their website. They can use it for marketing purposes. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's theirs while they're making those payments.
Okay. And if I take out a Zenscrow lease, let's say, for 36 months, 3 years, do I have to make equal payments over those months, or Can I pay a minimum amount and then a balloon at the end, or how does that work?
That's actually been kind of the gift and the curse for Zenscrow is it's completely flexible. It's really up to whatever terms and conditions the buyer and the seller want to do. So we've had, we can do straight leases where there's no potential option to buy at the end of the term. We can do leases where, it's a $100 monthly payment and then a big balloon at the very end. We can, a lot of the times, most of our transactions are sales where it's just split over X amount of months. So a $50,000 domain over 36 equal payments. Everything is, though, it is, I guess, a simple loan where the buyer can pay all at once. Like maybe in year 2, the buyer has developed something that is big, and they've got the cash at that point in time. They can definitely pay the remaining amount of the loan, and the transaction will finish with the title of, I guess you could say, the title of the domain going to the buyer.
Got it. And so what happens if I enter into a $50,000 lease over equal payments over 36 months and I miss a payment?
What we do typically is there's a grace period. Again, that's determined by the buyer and seller. Kind of, I guess, our de facto default period is 10 business days. Mm-hmm. So the buyer has 10 business days from the payment date that has been missed to cure the payment. If that does not happen, then he loses access to the domain, the transaction is canceled, and the domain goes back to the seller. Very important, though, the seller keeps all the funds that they've received for the whole period. So we actually had one transaction, it was a smaller transaction, around $20,000, that canceled in month 2 because the buyer's attorneys thought there might be issues with kind of what they wanted to go with branding and legal issues, so he decided to cancel. Which at the surface sounds kind of bad, but the seller got to keep the 25% down that they got, plus the 1 month payment. The domain went right back to him, and he's ready to sell it again. So that's kind of the great thing about it.
Yeah, definitely. If somebody paid me 25% of a $20,000 domain up front and then a month later said, no, I'm not interested, it's not too bad.
Yeah. And I mean, the great thing about that is we always have a lot of concerned sellers that legally they want to lock the buyer in, and if something happens, then they want to take the buyer to court and go a couple years. And we're just like, no, just make it simple. If they don't pay, the domain goes right back to you. And I know we're going to get into really the main service offering of Zenscrow, which is the monitoring to keep the domain safe during this whole process. So that's kind of the element that really makes this all possible. And it's something that is basically our main service offering. And then I'd also like to talk about the ease part, because that's the other thing that Zenscrow brings to the table is throughout the whole process we're there. We can help with coming up with terms, because again, there's so many.
Adam, no, we will not talk about how easy it is. That is off the table. We're going to get into that. So I haven't come across Zenscrow in the past, but I'm not somebody that has had the need to finance a large transaction for a domain name. How many years or how long has Zenscrow been in business?
14 months. Okay. And so it's been kind of quasi soft launched, you can say. We haven't really done any real traditional marketing. We did use our free $75 Google AdWords credit.
Nice.
And our free $50 credit. So we did some of that. And we were really fortunate to have people like Andrew Allman pick us up on Domain Name Wire, and Morgan Linton did a nice piece about us, and DN Journal really giving us some love. But that's been the full extent of the marketing efforts. That's
all right. And with only those 3 editorial mentions, how many transactions have you done in the first 14 months of business?
22 transactions for a total, and I got my note card right here.
Yeah.
No, that's why I'm looking down. I got for a total of $4,250,882, and that's rounded.
Nice.
Yeah,
$4.25 million worth of transactions. Excellent.
That's
so
correct.
It's not like you haven't financed some high worth domain names. And of the 22 transactions, how many actually started, and how 22 have finished? How many were the 23 that one that dropped out early, or are you counting that one within the 22?
Those are 22 closed. I wish I could say we went 22 for 23. That would be nice. Probably around 100 or so transactions. Along the way, certain things don't line up. One fallacy that I think a lot of sellers use when they come with us is that because they are letting somebody pay monthly payments, they can jack the price up, 2 times, 3 times as much. A lot of sellers do earn interest, so they should be compensated for allowing the buyer to make monthly payments. But if your domain is worth, let's say, 10,000, you can't come and say 100,000. It's the buyers aren't willing to just throw money at it just because they can develop it. So
right, exactly.
And there's some issues with just in general, people want higher interest. They might want longer terms. The buyer might want 60-month terms, and the seller wants 12 months, and sometimes it just doesn't line up.
So you've tried to do 100 deals, and you couldn't get agreement between the buyer and the seller. But of the 23 you started, 22 actually, I sort of look at it as the buyer and seller agree to the terms and conditions, and they move forward with the transaction.
That's right. That's right. We have, out of these 22 that I mentioned, the only one that did default, you could say, was that one that we just mentioned. Gotcha. We've had 3 or 4 others that have completed. Mm-hmm. So and those were all straight sales over X amount of months. So the buyer fulfilled their obligation. They paid all the monthly payments, and then they were transferred the domain. And then the rest are all currently active. So We're currently monitoring. We're currently in between making sure that everybody knows payments are due and payments have been received.
Sure.
So those are active.
Great. And I know that, I've interviewed Brandon from escrow.com on the show, and we talked about how that business got built and how they came across that fantastic domain name, zenscrow.com. It's an interesting domain name. How did you decide to use zenscrow.com as your business brand?
It was a combination of a lot of things. We actually had a couple targets that we wanted that just were out of our range financially. It is a bootstrap startup. And we actually tried to pitch them this concept before we got started with it. It didn't work out very well. So we were just kind of thinking of names, and actually we started really creating Zenscrow 2 years ago, and it was prior to escrow.com releasing their domain holding product. Mm-hmm. So at that point in time, we were thinking it would, because right now we use Zenscrow's domain holding product alongside with ours. It's kind of, we'll go over that all in one. But at that point in time, we were thinking, well, it's escrow. It's kind of like, a Zen escrow, and Zenscrow. It kind of made sense. It's a lot of people pronounce it differently. There's a lot of Zen escrow or Zen's crow. And actually, I think just recently on Rick Schwartz's post about the Second Bite, somebody actually did comment and they said, "Nice name." Not the best name for such.
Everybody's always a critic. So Zenscrow,
I definitely can understand it. I really wanted to get domainfinancing.com or something like that.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have the resources. We do have a couple names that we still kind of like, and so we're kind of thinking, now that we are getting a little bit more cred in the industry, now maybe we can reach out and
right.
Long.
But so why didn't you go to the person who has domainfinancing.com and say, hey, I'm going to finance this over 5 years so that I make sure I have the cash flow, and you're going to make more than you would on parking, and I'm going to make a great balloon payment at the end.
Yeah.
And walk away if you don't.
I think I got to reach out and do that. I mean, their name is Domain Financing, so if they say we won't finance, that's an oxymoron in itself.
All right, so you still may do it, and you may actually have a success through your own service.
That's correct. That's correct. Right. I like the Zenscrow name. It kind of grows on you.
Yeah. Once you know how to pronounce it. Yeah,
exactly.
I too made the same mistake. I was talking to our producer Wayne earlier today, and I said I mentioned Zenscrow, but I said Zenescrow. And he corrected me. And so if I make that mistake during the show, it's your job to correct me.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we tried to, on our logo, if you look at our logo, we tried to do something with colors to isolate the Zen portion and then the scroll next to it. So we'll count it as semi-successful.
Now,
at least they knew.
Do you own zenescrow.com as well?
I actually don't. Funny story. We're trying to pursue that, and it's kind of just out there. I don't think it's really doing anything, but they were unwilling to sell.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
All right. So, so basically, it's a rent-to-own model that you're building upon, and clearly, I can go directly to a seller, and I can say, I will pay you $500 a month. You're only making, $50 or $20 a month in parking on the domain name per month. I'll pay you $500, and then at the end of 3 years, I'll give you a balloon payment for what you and I agree is the true value of the domain today. And it'll be locked in, and I can have my attorney write up a contract. What's the benefit to me using you versus me doing it myself?
Well, first off, we can talk about the ease of use. So Zensco is really there for the whole transaction. We can help you. We actually have right now it's complimentary. Complimentary, I hate to use the term brokerage because it's not that official, but a matchmaking service. So you can actually tell us the targets that you're looking for, and we'll go out, reach out to the seller and educate them on the process. There are a lot of sellers that don't do anything like this or haven't considered it. So there's some education that goes into it. We can help both sides with terms. Then we actually create the agreement, and that's included in our fee. So we'll create the agreement based on the terms that both buyer and seller came together on. And then we're there for the whole process with payment reminders. So we do use escrow.com domain holding service to hold the domain in escrow through the time period. And there is, obviously, if you're familiar with escrow.com, there is an online portal, but they don't really do any reminders. So we're really there for the buyer to make sure that he knows payment is due, especially in that grace period. You'll hear from us like daily. We'll call, because not only is it worth our while actually for the payment to go through, but we want to make sure that you didn't put all these resources into developing that domain, the domain, then fail to pay, and the transaction has to be over and has to be shipped back. We never want to see that happen. So there's a lot of value in that right there. And then finally would be the security aspect of it in terms of the domain monitoring. The interesting thing with that is more on the seller side. Obviously, the seller being concerned about their domain name and the valuation staying there. But what our platform does is it enables these transactions to go through. A good portion of the sellers that we work with, they said they wouldn't have done it without knowing that we were there looking at the use.
Right. Because if I'm a seller, I've got this asset, it doesn't transfer title. It's mine until I receive the last penny that's due on it. And so if somebody does something to the value of that, uses the domain name for spamming, puts up, some sort of undiscriminate content on there that gets it banned from Google or has viruses or what have you, it could reduce the value of it. Just like if I am leasing a property and I don't upkeep the yard and the, dogs are going rabid inside the house and all that sort of stuff. So you do the monitoring of the domain name for the seller.
That's correct. So escrow.com domain holding service is amazing. Escrow.com is a secure third party. It'll hold on to that domain name. It'll request payment from the seller and transfer it from the buyer and transfer it to the seller. That's great, but there's nothing there. There was nothing there to really focus on that aspect. What is the buyer doing in the meantime during those monthly payments? And you listed definitely some bad ways. They can do stuff like cloaking. They can do high content door pages. My background, by the way, is I'm an SEO, so I'm not a domain investor, unfortunately. But so that's all the good for that purpose. There's lots of things that can be done. And so what we do is we monitor the domains daily to make sure that doesn't happen. That way, in the period of use, the valuation can stay there. The domain valuation isn't in jeopardy of being devalued, you could say.
Gotcha. All right, so just using your standardized agreement right off the bat is going to save me probably, a couple $1,000 in legal fees of my attorney.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right, and then I know that I've got a standard. And then I know I've got a standardized contract that other people have used and it's been vetted.
That's correct. And then you save the time with us helping to put the deal together. We can do that on your behalf as well. And then obviously with the monitoring, it might make some deals possible. Even if you yourself reached out to a seller, either they might not want to do it or they might want a really high amount up front. Maybe they'll say, okay, 50% up front. They want to make sure that they are compensated in case something does happen.
Yeah. Now, who actually does that brokerage work on my behalf as a buyer? Do you actually reach out to the seller and say, hi, my name is Adam Paddock. I'm reaching out to you from Zenscrow. I have a buyer that wants to buy your domain name, and we're going to use my service to finance it if I can get you and the buyer to agree to terms.
That's correct. Yeah. Mostly I do that portion. And then we do have a couple of side people that we use as well that can help out. And actually, I reached out early on. I reached out to a lot of the main players out there, a lot of the main brokers out there to try and get them on board. It's been obviously as a new service. I can expect hands down everybody to jump in and start sending us deals.
Right.
We've had a couple leads through established brokers, which has been nice.
Yeah.
But predominantly it's myself going out and doing that, reaching out, and
Gotcha.
I guess who better to do it than me? I created it, so I kind of know exactly the intricacies with what we can do with our agreement, and then what we can do with the monitoring as well.
Yeah. So you said you were not a domain name guy, and I like to do my research, and I go and try and find out how many domains you own. And from what I can tell, how many domains do you own? Let me see how good my research is.
Like 14.
Oh,
14.
I see. I turned up 23, I think, on Domain Tools.
Really? Oh, maybe I own more then.
So do you own any domains that you financed over time that are great 6-figure, 5-figure domain names?
Unfortunately not.
Too bad.
Obviously, I know we wanted to for our name. We spent a little bit of money on one new one that we just got is WeSellDomains.com. We might start using that to take the place of that brokerage, or just to really be like a knowledge resource for the sellers of our service.
Right.
And then every once in a while I'll peruse dropping stuff.
Sure.
I've made offers on some high ones that just didn't go through. There was a point where I was really thinking about the crowdfunding, which is obviously getting big. So there's a couple names that I really like there, but unfortunately, we weren't able to close the deal.
Yeah.
So
you said your background. You said your background was in SEO before you started Zensgrow. Were you doing SEO as a consultant, working for an agency? What was your background before Zensgrow?
I was in an agency, a company called Alorad in Southern California, a great company. They do also do a lot of domain investing as well, and building them up and selling them as full sites. So that's kind of where I started to get interested in the whole concept of buying a great domain asset, building it up, and then either obviously enjoying the fruits of your labor or selling it at that point in time. And actually, I was telling Wayne earlier. So Zensgrow, I guess the seed got planted back then. We were after a domain that was pretty expensive. It was around $80,000 for high-speed internet. I don't think I can give the exact domain. I apologize, but
okay, no worries.
It was real expensive. And the seller actually approached myself and my boss with the idea of doing something like this over monthly payments. And we didn't really kind of hear about that or consider that, and it kind of caught us off guard. But we started thinking about it. And we thought that sounds kind of interesting because we do want to develop it. We've got a pipeline on the back end to monetize it. So we went down the road of considering it. But then things got mixed up because he wanted to hold the domain while we made these monthly payments, while we were investing in developing it. And then both sides had attorneys that came on.
Oh, and good luck trying to get the attorneys to agree on that. Yeah.
It just was real complicated. And that's kind of when I think I started to click in my head like, wow, I wonder what could make this easier, what could make this more secure. That way we could do things like these, transactions like that.
Right. So that was the idea. You had a real business need at your company, at the agency that you're working for, and it just fell apart because the terms weren't easy to figure out and come together.
Exactly. Both parties, I think, honestly wanted to do it, but it's just too much ambiguity, in between there. So
definitely. And so when you left the agency, did you then start working on Zensgrow immediately, or what happened in between?
Not immediately. I hung out for a little while. No, I came actually, that was in Southern California. I came here to Phoenix, Arizona to work for another agency. I'm doing product development here. So it wasn't until maybe 6 months later that I actually sat down with a pen and pad and started to kind of figure out what was needed. And then so the interesting thing is at that point in time, like I said, it was before escrow.com really announced that they were doing a domain holding solution. So a good portion of my thoughts were for that actual product, a central person that would, sit there.
Darn you, Andy and Brandon.
I know. But it was, we started developing and everything like that. And it was probably, 3 months to when we were going to launch, when we saw the press come out about escrow.com domain holding. And so we were all like, there goes our complete idea. But then we had the idea to do the monitoring aspect and to do more of the upfront work as well. We sat down with Brandon actually one day in Irvine. They were still in Irvine. And we were so nervous, myself, just not being known. I knew who he was. Everybody knows who escrow.com is. We went to his office, and he was just such a good guy, sat us down. He really explained what they're doing, so we can kind of see that there was room for us to synergize and become a partner. And ever since then, Brandon and Andy and Ryan, who really deals with a lot of our shenanigans. We've got a lot of special requests on behalf of our clients.
Yeah.
I can't give enough thanks to those three. It wouldn't have been possible without them. I feel kind of bad, and this is a good outlet for us because a lot of people get it confused and think that we're competing with escrow.com. And so,
but actually you're using their service as the holding service for the domain. So
exactly,
they're the licensed escrow service that is known worldwide, and you're basically, it's like you're facilitating a deal and you're using Wells Fargo for some back-end services or something.
Exactly, we're forming a shell around them. The front end being the quote unquote brokering and creating the agreement and whatnot, and the back end being the monitoring, which makes it possible with a lot of sellers. So yeah, I feel kind of bad. Sorry, Andy. She always gets calls about what's the Zenscrow competing with you guys.
She can take it. She's tough. All right. So then you were working for an agency in Gilbert, Arizona, and then you left that company at some point.
Well, that's yes and no. I'm actually still consulting there.
Oh, you still are? Okay.
Yes. So I do work full-time consulting. Then I work full-time on Zenscrow as well.
Of course. Yeah. So you also mentioned right before we actually hit the record button that you had another business before Zenscrow.
That's correct.
Before you started working on Zenscrow full-time.
Exactly. That was before even going to that first agency in Southern California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did a online surf and skate company called Anti-Apparel, antiapparel.com. Still there.
Yep. Antiapparel.com. I like it. It's a great brandable domain name. And of course the, skaters and skiers are into that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so we, this was, I think, around 2006, 2007, we were at ASR, which is kind of like the traffic for the surf skate industry. A big convention, usually in San Diego, downtown San Diego. And we happened to just tag along with a buddy that was in the industry, and myself and a friend of mine. We were walking around. We saw all these great small brands that had a lot of great clothing, cut and sew. It wasn't mass produced.
Right.
Really, really nice stuff. But they were there to try and get into the PacSuns and the big guys, and it wasn't really happening for them. Or PacSun would just carry, 2 T-shirts. So what we did was we partnered with a lot of these smaller brands to carry their full line. But in exchange, we had them drop ship for us, and we did a lot of collab marketing. And so it was a great time. We ran it for about 18 months. It was a lifestyle company, but I was 24, 25 around then, so it was really good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you don't actually have to pack up stuff and ship it off, and you don't need to pay for it wholesale until you actually sell it retail, that's a good life for a 24-year-old living in San Diego.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, who could ask for more? I mean, we did a lot of co-marketing. We'd be featured in their ads, their magazine ads. There'd be a little "Get It at Antiapparel.com" logo on the bottom. And a couple of them actually, because they didn't want to sell it themselves on their own web front.
Yeah.
Probably because PacSun and Tilly's, they wouldn't carry their stuff anymore if they did do that.
Right.
So our site actually served as their back end. They would, there would be a shop here, and it would just forward directly to our site. So
nice.
Not a bad deal.
Yeah, definitely. So you started that when you first came to the mainland. You originally told me that you're born in Hawaii?
I am born and raised in Hawaii.
Which island?
Oahu.
Nice.
Yeah, I actually didn't get off the island until I was 18, 19.
Oh, and you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to get back to the island.
I know. It's kind of ironic.
So then you came to San Diego. You started Antiapparel.com. You sold that. You began working for an agency doing SEO. You continued doing SEO, and you continued to do it today as your main consulting practice.
That's correct. That's correct. And so
Great.
that the great thing about that is it feeds right into our monitoring offering. A good portion of that monitoring is on the SEO side. And definitely I'd like to get into that because there is a lot of questions on, how do I monitor? And
Yeah. And
on the boards, there have been a couple of sellers that were just like, well, I'll just monitor it myself. But we provide some value there that goes beyond if they
okay,
just
so let's do that. I want to ask you about your fee structure. I want to ask you how, what kind of domains you'll finance, what's out of your sweet spot area, but we'll get to that. Let's talk about, so we talked about your process. You create the agreement. You will act as the broker if necessary to pull the parties together and help them negotiate it. So you create the agreement, you set it up through escrow as the back end so that you make sure that everything's in process. You send the payment reminders. If somebody's delinquent, you make sure that you're on top of them to keep that transaction going as long as you can, or until it closes. And then you do domain monitoring to make sure that the value of the domain is not reduced at all during the time. So let's talk about domain monitoring. What does that include?
So basically what we do is for each domain that we're monitoring during the monthly payment period, we built a system that continuously spiders the name or the web resource attached to the name. And what it does, it spiders the code. So we grab everything that is publicly available online. So daily it runs through all the names that we're monitoring. There's, again, 14 active right now. It caches the code for each page, and then the next day, it comes around again and spiders again. And if there's a variance in the pages, or if there's a page that is added, it gets flagged. And so what we do at that point in time is we manually review all the pages that are flagged. So we look at the code, we look at the front end just to see if there's anything that violates that particular agreement. And so we call them the domain usage guidelines, but those are determined by the buyer and seller. So, no putting up this kind of content, no selling links. We make sure that for that particular domain, everything is going according to those domain usage guidelines.
Yep.
And another very important point is we focus on uses and issues that are they're at the direct control of the buyer. So for instance, like selling links, they're going to have, high CPC text links on their site that are external, outbound, unrelevant, clear as day, that they're paid and unrelated. And so we will, reach out to the buyer and say, hey, let's no follow all those. That goes against the agreement that you signed here. You can keep them on as long as you straight up no follow them. If they don't comply with that, then we can take away the usage of the domain name from them by rerouting the DNS. We actually haven't taken away usage yet, which is great. We had about 2 or 3 instances so far. With one was that very same scenario. Another one was extreme adult content. I actually didn't like seeing it. And so the buyer at that point said that they've been hacked, which very well could be the case. But it is something in their control. So we said either remove it immediately, or we're going to have to suspend your use until you do comply.
Yeah.
And so Zenscrow is there to monitor, find a situation, work with the buyer to relieve that situation, and if not, to take away the use. So that's actually that's where the seller can't monitor it themselves. Contractually, we give Zenscrow that power to monitor and the responsibility to restrict access. Right. If something does not comply.
So the buyer is agreeing that if I show adult content or inappropriate content as defined as follows, then Zenscrow has the full right to redirect the domain name to a third-party site or a holding page or whatever. So you're covered in that, and it's clear what is appropriate and inappropriate.
Exactly, and the transaction continues. The buyer can continue making payments, and if once they do comply, we'll work with them and we'll review it. And if it does comply, we can give them back the usage. But But yeah, that in a nutshell, that's what happens.
So that makes sense. You've got your automated bot out there. It grabs all the content from every single page on the website. It comes and stores it. It tells you if there's any differential between yesterday and today. But it still requires a person to go in and actually look at the content to make sure that an image that may not have a file name that seems inappropriate is actually not inappropriate. Is that are you paying contractors to review the diffs, the differentials of the content, or do you do that, or somebody within your control?
I do a little bit of it, and then we also have 2 external SEOs that we contract with. And the great thing about it is we incentivize them to find a problem. So if they find an issue, they get paid. So they are out there, actively looking to find issues.
They're not getting paid if they don't find an issue?
They get paid a little bit. But if they can find us an issue, it's worth their while, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So that makes sense on the website itself. Now, when somebody actually buys the website and they can set up their own DNS and their own email, what's to stop somebody from sending out spam on that domain name and somehow affecting the value of it?
That's a great point. What we do with that regard is we work with escrow.com to monitor any feedback that comes in through the Whois email. That's pretty much all that we can do on that front. But it is a similar, I could start sending emails using Domain Sherpa. It's easy to splice that into the header of even your search.
Don't do that, Adam.
I won't do it.
I
won't do it. But I do tell sellers, because some sellers are concerned with that. And, I tell them it could happen either way. But we will get that alert. We host with GoDaddy, which is really good at that alert. If there's anything that is troubling, they'll definitely send that, cut it out, email. And once we get that, we'll research it and we'll snap use away.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Okay. So I think I understand the monitoring part of it. You're doing that on a daily basis. Is there anything else that you do to monitor?
No, we can also take feedback directly from the seller. So if the seller is very invested and, checks out the domain and how it's built and used and sees an issue that they think is an issue, we're real easy they can email us that issue and we will research it. If there is, in fact, an issue with the agreement, then we will go through with it that way.
Gotcha. So one of the other benefits is that you're the intermediary and you're there to listen to the buyer and the seller and make sure that the transaction is happening. You're not just a bank saying, make the payment, you got 10 days. If you don't, that's the end of it. You're there to make sure it happens.
That's correct.
Facilitate the transaction.
Exactly. I look at it like property management. The great thing with the domain, with switching the DNS is if you have a renter that comes in and marks up your walls and is crazy, with the domain, I could easily just type a button, they're out. It's a little harder with the renter.
Yeah, you can't go change the locks that easily, can you?
Exactly. But I do want to assure buyers out there that we look at issues that are their direct control. Depending on the severity, we haven't had anything super severe where we would, just change the DNS right away. We are very good at contacting them, telling them exactly what issue we see, and suggesting what they can do to to solve that issue.
Nice.
So it's not the Gestapo.
Yeah. So it seems like a great service from both sides of it, Adam. How much do you charge? What's your fee structure for setting up this type of arrangement over a number of years?
We do 3% of the purchase price up front. So that's due for with the initial payment. So these are all combined with the payments, and then we do $69 monthly combined with each monthly payment thereafter. That covers everything from matchmaking to creating the agreement to the monitoring. It also covers the domain holding service fees. So it covers escrow.com's fees. And by the way, we also use newlaw.com. We have Howard New that actually, in some cases, will hold the domain as well. Thanks a lot, Howard. Another person who is
okay. So 3% up front and then $69 monthly. So basically, whether it's a 2-month deal or a 2-year deal, I'm still paying that 3% up front, but then the $69 monthly actually will be longer. And actually, neither of those have any bearing on whether the payment structure includes interest only or interest in principal or, balloon payment at the end or equally distributed. It's regardless.
It's regardless, yeah, because we do it on the sum of all payments. Just to make it easy, we over the last 14 months, we experimented with like a ton of different structures, all upfront, all monthly, full gamut.
Yeah.
We've been finding though that this is probably the easiest way for everybody to know what's going on. And it kind of works really good with the value proposition of the product, where they don't have the buyer doesn't want to put down a ton of money. So the 3% really isn't too much of an issue for them for getting the opportunity to do this overpayments.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking before the interview, how am I going to ask him what his effective annual percentage rate is? Because, I can go finance a domain name on my credit card and I'm paying 15%, let's say, and I can go to a loan shark and I'm paying 21%, and, loan shark being some of the people in the domain name industry. And so really, there's no way for me to actually calculate it with your service because the terms could be all over the place. The $69 that you're charging monthly and the 3% up front, there's no way to actually charge it until you actually know what the terms of the agreement are.
That's correct. And we have the 22 transactions we've done have run the full course from 0% interest, which in that case was a name where the seller got their asking price or a little bit above their asking price, and I guess they were comfortable with that. I think it was over 12 months. So he was willing to do that, up to 15% or 20%, but usually 10% is probably like our standard. That's what the seller charges. So to really get that rate down, you'd have to add that 10% to our fees.
Yeah. So you say 0%, but the buyer actually had to pay the 3%, which covered escrow.com and your fee, and then they had to pay $69 a month. So really, to finance it through you, they had to pay something.
That's correct. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
No, you're definitely correct with that.
All right, but it was 0% to the seller.
The seller didn't charge
interest.
They just got their asking price,
right?
And they were happy with that.
Yeah.
So what can you do?
Yeah, well, yeah. If your asking price, if you think it's too high and somebody's actually willing to pay it, yeah, I'll let you pay it over time.
And it was it's over 12 months, so it's not a huge time frame.
Yeah.
We go up to 60 months, so 5 years. So over that course load, a lot of sellers definitely want to be compensated for stretching it out that long. And actually, one question that we get a lot is what happens if in year 2 or 3 somehow somebody makes an offer on that name to the seller. Again, they're not listed on the Whois anymore, but somehow they get in contact with somebody that says, I understood you own this domain.
To the seller or to the buyer?
To the seller.
Okay.
That originally sold it. And the answer is they can't sell. It's locked into this agreement.
It's an agreement. But what happens if the buyer gets an offer?
That's correct. The buyer can sell. The buyer can sell. They have to cover the remaining portion of the price in order to sell. But we can work with escrow.com to do this, where the person interested in buying will escrow that money, then we'll transfer it to the original seller, get him all paid and done, and then carry on the transaction at the very end.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. And I think a lot of sellers, there's a small portion of sellers that are uncomfortable with that. What happens if over the course of this, the buyer is able to expunge a whole lot of money, above and beyond the purchase price? And our answer is twofold. One is, remember, nobody's going to buy your domain to lose money. There's no buyer that wants to purchase your name, put effort into it, and then go bankrupt. That's not their intention. So the intention is always going to be there to make money off of your domain name above and beyond what you're compensated for.
Right.
And two, even though it could happen in year 2 and 3, it would happen even if you sold it outright. I mean, you could sell the buyer the domain for cash. 2 weeks later, he gets an offer for $1 million, and you see it on DN Journal. That's just life. So
yeah, exactly.
So we kind of give them a little comfort, and we say it could happen, but just make sure that what you're getting in exchange is what you want. And I think that's really the great thing about Zenscrow is we don't push either party. We want both parties to be happy with the terms. That way, both parties walk away.
Yeah. So for that 3% and $69 per month, you actually get a counselor too, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Marriage, give me a call.
Hey Adam, I'm having a problem with my wife.
That's right. Tweet me an issue that you have with your children.
All right. So there's got to be a sweet spot for your business service. If I want to finance a $5,000 domain, does that make sense? Will you take that on?
We'll take anything. The restriction that we have is we won't take names that it obviously could have a UDRP issue. So if your store is Michael's Google Store.com, we won't take that. But other than that, we'll take any transaction amount. We have done a 5,000, which has been our lowest transaction over 12 months. The issue with cost effectiveness kind of goes towards the buyer at that point.
At the $69 per month fee. Yeah.
Exactly. Whether or not that they feel that the potential is there to make that 3% and $69, minuscule, and the benefit of getting that $5,000 domain over, let's say, 12 months. You're looking at $400, $500 a month. Yeah. Whether or not that is worth it to them, and we can't answer that. It's up to the buyer. We have had some buyers come in and want to do like $1,000 name. And at that point, they would be paying, way more than that $1,000 in fees if they did it over 12 months, or not over, but a big chunk of that $1,000 would be in fees.
Right.
And we just said, I'm sorry, it's not feasible at this point in time, unless you're willing to pay it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So walk me through a recent transaction. First of all, tell me like a great domain name that you just financed.
Let me tell you, unfortunately, everybody out there watching, I did tell Michael in our pregame that with Zenscrow, we have an NDA on all our transactions for not only ourselves, but the buyer and seller. We don't reveal anything in terms of the parties and the domain name. I guess if the buyer and seller really wanted to divulge it, then we would entertain that. That hasn't come up, though.
So if they wanted to strike the DNA that from the contract, you would strike it, and then if the seller wants to promote, hey, I just sold my domain name for $4 million, even though it's only going to be a balloon payment 36 months from now, and they're only paying me $10 a month, they can do that if they want.
Yeah, they can definitely do that. That as long as both parties like the terms, we'll definitely take that on.
But everybody I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, I've always been a big believer. I do like the fact that, you can keep your transaction secret. I think that it's really only the buyer and seller. It's really only their it's only really their issue to know about. Right. But, I mean, if they want to publicize it, that's them.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry we were speaking over each other there, Adam. There's a delay slightly on Skype that the audience may not, fully appreciate when it's airing, but... All right, so you'll finance anything as long as it makes sense financially for the seller, for the buyer to do so. And you can't reveal the domain names that you've had. Can you reveal roughly, are they, well, you've got 4.25 million over 22 deals. That makes a lot of six-figure deals.
Yeah, we've had one 7-figure, which was great. And actually, that was our second deal, and the seller, he would not do it without the service. The deal actually came from escrow.com. Thanks, guys. But he was very concerned with what activity would be going on with the domain. It's a gambling term. It's definitely a high-end generic term. So he did look into just the domain holding service, and that wasn't enough for him in order to do the transaction. He needed the surety of the monitoring, which, lucky enough, we provided. So Andy called me and forwarded all that, and we worked with both parties to explain the process, and we were able to get the deal closed.
Yeah. And, just thinking about it, escrow.com doesn't care because they're still getting paid just like it says on their website. So they're getting potentially more business, and business that may be turned away from escrow.com as a result of not being able to monitor. They can still preserve their income by working with you on it. So it makes sense from both perspectives.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the only headache they've gotten so far is the confusion between does Zenscrow compete with you? And so we're actively trying to work on that. And this is a great step. Thank you for having me on the show in order to educate the public on how we work together.
Yep.
We're a team.
All right. So a few weeks from now, Wayne Nelson, Domain Sherpa producer, myself, are heading down to Florida for the Traffic Conference put on by Rick Schwartz and Howard New every year. Went last year, fantastic conference. If you haven't booked your ticket yet and you're thinking about networking and learning the industry and, making connections, I highly recommend getting down to Traffic. You will be there also, correct, Adam?
I will be, yes.
And I've seen your company name promoted in a lot of the emails that I've gotten from Rick Schwartz and Howard New, in that there will be an auction going on, and you're going to be a part of that auction in some way.
That's correct. So there's, it's called the Second Byte Auction. It's actually the brainchild of Rick. Genius. If you're a genius, this guy, he's going to make it. He's going to make it. So what it is the sellers can opt into what's called the Second Byte, and it's an auction. So let's start from the very beginning. It's kind of complex. I'm trying to explain it again. So your name comes up and it fails to meet reserve in the initial auction. Mm-hmm. Then it'll go to the second byte auction at the end of the original auction. The reserve is made public and people can bid at or above that reserve in order to get the name. And so what happens is they're able to make monthly payments through Zenscrow for that name. And so we're doing 10%. I think it's 15% down, with the balance paid over 12 equal monthly payments, just to make it easy.
So it becomes clear. We don't have to negotiate that like what you can use your service for. 15% down, the remainder is split equally over how many months?
12 months.
12 months. So I, as the buyer, have to pay my 15% up front. Do I need to pay another 3%?
Yes, sorry.
Of the transaction. Okay, I need to make a down payment of 15%. In order to start the transaction, I need to pay my 3%, and then I pay $69 in addition to the equal payments of the remainder of the balance.
That's correct. That's correct. So it allows the buyer to get into this great name, mm-hmm. And split it out over monthly payments. But then on the seller side, maybe your name didn't quite make it where you wanted to be with the reserve, but maybe providing the flexibility of the payments, that might put it over the edge to where you can get it sold. We did, like you said, we wanted to make an easy structure. That way it's not ambiguous when people are bidding. And this is kind of one that I think is good on both parties. It's not a long time frame for the seller, but it does provide a lot of flexibility for the buyer. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a happy median. I'll have to talk to Rick. I don't know if he's going to offer, custom terms on the back end, but as it stands right now, it is going to be 18% down, including the fee, and the rest over 12 monthly payments.
Okay, so if I'm buying a $10,000 domain, I'm going to put 15% down, which is $1,500, $1,500, and I'm also going to make a payment for this Zenscrow system of 3%, so that's $300.
$300.
So $1,800 comes off my credit card right off the bat. And mm-hmm. now I've got 12 monthly payments of the remainder of the $8,500 to pay. And let's say that 3 months in, I don't like it, I can walk away from it. And let's say that, 3 months in, I want to just pay off the remainder of the balance. I can just pay it off. That's my flexibility.
That's correct. Yes. Get that name, put your whole life into it, develop it out, make it a great business, and instead of putting that extra $8,000 into the domain, put it towards development, mm-hmm. put it towards marketing, and really make something out of it.
Great. All right, so I understand what's going on at Traffic during the auction, during the Second Byte part of that auction, and you're going to be there at the cabanas, walking around, meeting and greeting people.
Exactly. It's my first Traffic, and I am a noob. I'm a newbie in the industry, obviously. So I don't know anybody, so if you see me just wandering around, definitely come by and say hello. That'd be awesome. I'm sure, like I said, I'm going to follow you around all night, Michael.
Oh
And
yeah, we're going to hang out. You're going to be
all
so
right.
drunk by the time by the auction rolls around, you won't know what's going on. But that's okay. Rick's in charge
Excellent.
of that.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right. Will you be offering any specials at the traffic conference that attendees should keep an eye out for?
I haven't actually really thought about any specials. I
All
mean, I
right, so there
definitely want to.
might be one.
I know. It'll be,
Maybe.
if it is a special, it'll be a Domain Sherpa special.
Excellent. All right. So come
Excellent. But
find Adam at the bar, and we'll talk about the Domain Sherpa special if there is one.
Exactly, exactly. I look forward to meeting everybody. I've talked to a lot of people that have been on your show. We did actually, I can't mention people, but we've done one or two people on your show we've done deals with, which has been great.
Great.
But people that have helped me out, obviously, with escrow.com. Michael Berkins has really helped us out initially, and he's actually thrown some wrenches in our business model. Which is great. Thanks, Michael. And we've talked to just a whole lot of people, through Skype or through email. So it'll be good actually to meet them in person. This is probably the first time they've seen me. So this interview has taken away all my mysteriousness, which I was hoping to keep intact. But I'm definitely thankful to be on here talking about our process. I actually firmly think that this way of doing transactions is the future. Obviously, that's why I do what I do. With things like crowdfunding and with like the lean startup, taking hold, I can just see more people that still want, an upper echelon name, but they don't want to put all this money into it. And then on the flip side, with domain parking being where it is, I definitely want the sellers to be compensated and really get the money back from that asset. So I think that it's a good way for both parties to unite. And so we're actually, I don't know if you want to get into the future.
Sure.
See, that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah.
So the main thing that we wanted to do, what we always intended this product to be all about, was we intended it to be part of retail outlets that are already out there. So like GoDaddy Auctions or Sea-Doo. We wanted the sellers to be able to maybe opt in and flag as I'll accept this price over X amount of months.
Right.
Or even an auction similar to the Second Byte. Maybe you put your domain up for auction and you say, okay, I want this reserve and I'm willing to do it over X amount of months. Mm-hmm. We really wanted to, kind of become like a payment gateway that's added on to those brands. And so, again, obviously as the founder, I'm enthralled in the idea. So, and I'm a newbie, but I called up people like Jeff Kupiecki, who's not with Oversea.net anymore, but I called him up. I called up high people from GoDaddy, Tim with Sea-Doo. I stalked him on Facebook. And I was like, guys, you got to get on this. Let us help you sell these domains. We've gotten feedback, which has been so. I think that they want to kind of see where we are, so this is a good step, kind of really see that we are adding value and that people are interested before they go farther and actually do something with us. But after the last 14 years of really putting everything on the line, we developed a sound process. And so now I think we're at the point where we do want to actually market. Again, we haven't really done any sort of marketing up to now. It's all been word of mouth or me just being out there trying to do deals. So really, guys, at Traffic, I'm going to nail you guys, corner you, and see if we can do something together to make this just right in line with the checkout process at some of those.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Once you actually set a price on your domain, you're much more likely to get a transaction. I think GoDaddy has shown that, or maybe Afternic has shown that. And I think that if you put a $10,000 domain out there, I know there's a lot of domainers who say, well, I'm not going to price it because maybe some dolt will come up and give me $20,000. I'm like, well, either you want to sell it or you don't. If you want to sell it, providing another option to people to pay it over time is definitely going to be a benefit.
That's right. I'm all, again, as an aside, I'm all for pricing your name. I don't know. I always felt like if you walked into a grocery store and you got a gallon of milk.
Ask about every single product? Yeah.
Yeah. If you picked up a gallon of milk and you said, okay, I want to buy this, how much is it? And they were like, well, how much do you want to pay for it? You'd be like, I don't want to overpay for this gallon of milk. I don't know where I should be. But I think if the seller really knows exactly what they want, I think actually on your show, I think it was Adam when he was talking about his transactions. He knows exactly what he wants.
Right, Adam Dicker.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And he won't settle for less. But once he gets what he wants, he's good with it. So he'll price some of those like that accordingly. I mean, I do empathize. I know that if you put down a price, you're going to get somebody that automatically will, toss in an offer 5K less. So I'm realistic.
Well, it goes both ways. Somebody tosses in an offer of 5K less, and people are like, "Oh, I'm so put off that you offered me half of what I think it is." And then like somebody comes in with a full price offer, and like, "Oh man, I totally undersold it." It could go either way. You got to be a business person and.
Yeah, I love those when you go out and you're negotiating and the first response from the seller is $100,000 cash, and then you're like, okay, I can't do that. I can do 20, and they're like, sold. I was like,
exactly.
Just said 20. We could have just.
Well, you see it every day on Pawn Stars and all these shows out there that are now, showing you negotiation real time.
Yeah, exactly.
Hilarious.
So it's a lot of fun. At least it makes it fun.
I like where you're heading with the service, Adam. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about ZenScrow before we wrap up the show?
One additional thing that I'd like to say is we are looking to, if we're not able to partner with some of those entities, we're going to do a lot more on our own. So we are looking at maybe doing an auction platform that'll be for leases and for monthly payments, or doing like a straight up marketplace. We've already had people ask to list their names.
Yeah.
Right now we don't do that on our site, but we might get into that as well. And I've been thinking about what I'm about to say for a long time because I didn't want to come off as being like, I don't know, egotistical or just whimsical based on the idea. But we did our 4.2 million really not trying very hard. Honestly, we were focused on the product mostly. But I think if we do go out there and we really try hard, I think that we can compete with some of these outlets. That being said, we don't want to. We really want to focus on our product, on monitoring and on that front. So I'm hoping, guys, that we can get together and work out a deal that'll be mutually beneficial. But if not, look out for that. We've been developing the name for the marketplace platform is probably going to be goforthe.com. So goforthe.com. We've been just putting some branding into it. I think it'll be really great. It's a really great brandable, memorable name. So 3-6 months from now, I think we're going to be at a place where we're fully there and ready for high volume. I think we're actually there now, ready for high volume now.
Yeah.
We'll give it a couple months to talk with people, and if it doesn't work out, I think that we're going to try and go our own way. So be on the lookout for that. We'll definitely
all right, and if people have a great domain name that they think would be good for building a marketplace, contact you. You might actually finance it from them.
There we go. We can do it right there, right to ZenScrow. Exactly.
All right. If you have a follow-up question, please post it in the comments below, and we'll ask Adam to come back and answer as many as he can. If you want to follow ZenScrow.com, you can do so on Twitter at ZenScrow. And, Adam Paddock, founder of ZenScrow.com, thank you for coming on the show, sharing your knowledge, and shedding light on the rent-to-own domain name opportunities available out there. And thanks for being a Domain Sherpa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.